What we need to be thankful for and content with is God being present in the darkness. God never leaving us alone in the darkness.
Welcome to With You Podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
I'm a marriage and family therapist and professor.
And I'm a birth doula and educator.
And we're married to each other. We've raised 4 kids, and we're in professions, as you see, that deal with coming alongside people.
Right. So in this podcast, we're going to share what we've learned about relationships and life transitions. We'll do that by sharing our own experiences, by interviewing people who have a great story to tell. Mm-hmm. And we've got some expert interviews to give us some even better information.
It's going to be so good. Let's get started.
Please join us.
I'm excited about today's interview.
Yeah, we are both excited to talk to somebody who we know and love. And it's our first interview episode that we're dropping for the podcast.
Yeah, it's so good.
So one of the reasons that we want to start with this is because we are interested in stories that have something to do with relationships. And in this case, it's somebody who has a story to tell about how her past and things she's lived through have affected the way she is today and how she finds hope in those circumstances.
Yeah, her name is Emöke. And it's always hard. She's like, I'm okay. That's how she reminds me to say her name.
Yeah, so we might mispronounce things. She's from Hungary, and Hungarian is a hard language to master.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to kind of use the little words we know because we lived there for 4 months.
Yeah, so a little background on that is that we, David, you probably won't tell this, so I'll say for you.
No, thank
you. David won a Fulbright scholarship to live and work in Hungary for a semester. So on his sabbatical semester where he teaches, we got to spend that time in Europe, mostly in Hungary and also traveling around. And we got to know some really fascinating people there.
Yeah, it was amazing and humbling. So we got to kind of travel, speak. We got to speak together. It was the first time we did something like this there. And we talked about relationships and through mutual friends, we got to spend some time with Emöke and hear about Hungary. Like we were in college during the fall of communism.
Right. So we moved to this place that we really knew very little about, and we learned
honestly,
so much.
I didn't know where it was. we kind of were like, yay, we got a Fulbright to Hungary.
Where is Budapest? I don't know.
Yeah. Is that in Hungary?
It sure is.
It is.
On the Danube. Yeah, so we learned a lot about that part of the world, and that colors a lot of Emöke's story, of course. It's where she grew up and has a lot to do with who she is today. So just a little bit of context about the country of Hungary, because we didn't know this. We learn about it in our history books, but they, in recent history, first of all, they have a long history. Much longer than the U.S. So that was the first thing we learned in the little town that we lived in Hungary.
Eger.
A cannon would go off every afternoon. We lived
scared
close,
the crap out of me.
We lived close to this castle wall, and we would be startled every afternoon. And it took us, I don't know how many weeks or months to realize why this was happening.
And it was every day.
We just thought, oh, fun. They're shooting off cannons in the castle. But it went off at the same exact time every day.
Which was a weird time. It wasn't like on the top of the hour or on a quarter of the hour.
It was at 15:52 in military time.
3:52 every day.
3:52.
So we're having a cup of tea.
Boom! So the reason was that the castle in this town was able to hold off, the people of the Hungarian people were able to hold off an invasion from the Ottoman Empire in the year 1552. And so almost, 500 years later?
Yeah, just 100.
They continue to shoot this cannon off at 1552 to
celebrate,
commemorate. Hey, we held off the Turks. So they have a long memory and and they've had a long history of being overtaken and having land taken away.
They
And
fall right in that space. If you're not familiar and you haven't pulled up a map yet, they fall in that space right between Europe and Asia, really, like right up against
they border
Ukraine
and Romania and Austria on the other side.
And so countries would come back and forth, kind of invading them, and they're used to.
Yeah, and they're unique in that they have a language that doesn't really overlap with languages of the countries surrounding them. So they feel very isolated and they've been overtaken. So I think the general culture of the Hungarian people is to feel like they need to defend themselves and they're kind of alone in this. And it's affected a lot of the culture, but also in more recent history, and our friends who live there lived under communist rule by the Soviets from 1945, I think, till 1989, 1990. So a long period of time where they were under a really kind of oppressive regime without freedoms. Yeah.
And Emöke will talk about this briefly, I think, but people would turn on each other. And so the idea of being safe, secure, trusting relationship that we kind of take for granted here in the States a bit hasn't been a normal thing in the recent history.
Right. And I mean, we were in college in 1989, so it feels like a long time ago, but not a long time ago. And so to meet people there in, how many years later was that?
A lot.
A lot of years later. It was a few years ago now, so 2018 was when we were there. People are still coming back from the effects of that, of being under an oppressive regime and not feeling like they had freedom economically, personally, politically. And so we see that even down to the personal family relationships.
Yeah, one of the families I kind of consulted with when I was there, I wasn't doing clinical work, but I would sit and talk with, the parents shared how they felt they could not be parented by their parents during the communist rule because the parents were really afraid if I discipline my child, if I correct them and they're not happy about it, they can tell their teachers either a true or a falsehood about them and report them and have the child taken away. So family members would report on each other as being good citizens. Yeah. But it broke down trust. And
right. And we heard stories of people who would just disappear and be punished for small things. And so it's hard for us to comprehend what that looked like and how that affected people. But we all know people in hard times respond differently. And some people barely survive and other people thrive. And that's one of the reasons we want to bring Emöke's story to you, because there's a light shining from inside her. That's what draws us to her. And I think she's got some things to say about hope and about more than survival. And partly it comes from the faith that her family instilled in her when she grew up. And so she's going to tell us a bit about where she's coming from and how she has hope in some difficult circumstances.
Yeah. So her professional background, just for you all to know, she's a counselor. She did so much better on this interview than we did. She's on the radio all the time. She's really quite well known in Hungary as a professional around areas of personal growth and dealing with problems. And being able to hear her share about some challenges and the hope that resides in her from that and how it gets lived out, I think will be special. It was special for us.
Yeah. So let's talk to Emöke.
All right. Well, we're so glad that Emöke Tapolyai is with us today, and she's flying all the way from Hungary.
Yes, all the way.
All the
I'm
way.
glad to be with you.
How many thousands of miles apart are we? Many thousands.
I have no idea.
Yeah. So you're in Budapest right now, right?
Yes, I am in Budapest, Hungary.
Tara and I were talking about it. You and I met about 8 years ago. It was 2014, and we met in Prague.
Yes,
and
in the Czech Republic.
So what do you remember thinking when you first met me?
Oh, that's dangerous.
Do you really want to have it online?
Yeah, might as well. Why not?
I was thinking, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Who could that wonderful woman be who
That-
survived it?
I get that a lot.
Yeah, that's about right.
So this was at a conference for therapists in Prague, right? And you guys had this relationship already, and then we got to come and get to know you better when we lived in Hungary for a few months. So that
Yes,
was then
that was
you
a
got
nice
to
time.
yeah, so I got to get to know who Emöke was as well we had a lot of fun together.
Yeah, it's never good when my professional life and personal life kind of gets together because it just causes more problems for me.
Isn't it nice to have such a mass around you? Life doesn't get boring.
That's exactly right. And you two together, life is not boring when I'm around you two.
No, I call it a creative mess.
Yeah, well, before we kind of go into some questions we have for you about your story, could you just give a little intro about who you are, where you live, what your context is, what you do?
Okay, the little intro part is the difficult one, so stop me if I'm going over the little intro part.
Okay, that's enough. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I grew up actually in Hungary, and I grew up in a communist Hungary, in a Christian home. And my father and my mother and my family was involved with smuggling Bibles across the borders. And we lived under strong pressure and surveillance, and a lot of our rights were denied. Like I was not allowed to go to high school. I was not accepted to high school. So we went through a lot of turmoil. Actually, I did as a child growing up in this pressured society. And then when I was 16, we went to France as political refugees, and from France to America. And I became an adult person in America. And then later on, once communism fell, I returned to Hungary. And after a couple of years, 7 years, I returned to America again, but this time not as a political refugee, but as an international student on scholarship to study for my clinical area for counseling at Ashland Theological Seminary. And from there, I returned to Hungary again, and I have been living here since. And I have been working on counseling and getting other Christian counselors to pull together. And we have built an agency, a Christian counseling center, and it's a wonderful work. Was I short enough?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was
That was a good summary.
really good summary, and it reminded me a lot, especially when you're talking about the childhood before coming as kind of coming for asylum, thinking about trust in relationship, because our conversations with people are all about how relationships are affected, and thinking about communism, thinking about kind of the things you said. It was a rough time. How was trust built in relationship? What did that look like?
It's a very, very interesting part of my past, and I think for many of us, especially those who did not agree with the political system, and especially if not just the political, but the faith-based system is different. Trust was not something that we had automatically. I remember constantly thinking and analyzing people. Are they the ones that I should trust or not? Are they safe or not safe? And not safe can mean all the way from you're not going to be able to study, all the way to you will go through severe persecution to the point of death. By the time I was born, Hungary already had the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, so the communism was a lot softer version, but the residues were still there. So we still felt that trust is not something that you have automatically.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to understand, those of us who've grown up in the US with just kind of taking for granted the freedoms that we have. So when we lived in Europe, it was really interesting to us to learn what life was like for you. So I'd love you to paint us a little bit of a picture of what that meant to live under communism as a child, because a lot of that was new information to us. We read about things in textbooks, but hearing people's stories who lived through it and what it really meant for you is really different. So I'd just be interested to hear. I know you had to learn Russian in school, right? That's one of the things.
Well, yeah, we had to learn Russian in school, and since we had Russian lesson every single day, we all hated it. It was an silent agreement that we will hate Russian because it is required.
Mm.
So I have studied Russian for 12 or even more years. I don't even know how many, but we often laugh with my old classmates when we meet occasionally that we still don't know a single sentence, because it's interesting how we were able to recite the required homework and give it back, but instantly we forgot it. In the minute you are allowed to forget what you were forced to memorize, you will forget it. In the minute you are allowed to forget
It
it.
sounds like math for me. But I get
So,
that. Yeah.
in terms of Russian, that was interesting. I think what left a more influence on me and kind of stamped my heart was that I attended church, and for me, church was the community that was a wonderful place, and it was a group of people who believed the same way, who agreed on the same values, who were striving for the same thing. It was more than just a church community. And because of it, I tried to attend it almost every day of the week. Tuesday, I had youth group. Thursday, I had a prayer meeting. Sometimes I went to a different church to be a part of it on Fridays. Sometimes even Saturdays, I went to another church just so I could be a part of this group. And Sundays, I attended morning and afternoon services, and I never had enough. Just what I remember, that it was never enough. And I think that was the place where actually I learned to trust other than family relations. It was the place where I learned that this is safe, because what we believe in is a very firm foundation.
Wow. Yeah, that's something we were really interested in hearing because, there's a lot of bleak stories, I'm sure, that come out of that time, but we're really interested in hearing what kept it. We know you as a really fierce person, a really strong resilient person, and not everybody reacts to hard times that way. So that's what we're really curious about. Is you've already kind of alluded to a lot of the relational stuff that kept you strong and gave you a foundation in the church. But what are some things that gave you a sense that this would be over or that you would survive?
I never thought about it. I never knew if it would be over one day or not. It was not something I was wondering about. I didn't think about will I survive it or not, because I didn't know any other normal. To me, that was normal. Normal was that I don't belong. That was normal. And normal was that I belong to somewhere else. And that was something that I never considered as a thought of how will I survive. One thing I definitely want to emphasize, that my parents' life and work and ministry and faith, and my grandparents' life and ministry and faith really had a great influence on me, both on me and my sisters and brothers. My father and my mother were collecting the Bibles. That, I don't know, some people may know who Brother Andrew was. He was one of the ministry, was a very strong person in Bible smuggling ministries. And Brother Andrew would bring hundreds of Bibles into our home. And we had a small farm far away in the middle of nowhere. And I remember my parents hiding those Bibles in the cabins and the cabinets and everywhere, under bed, everywhere I would look, there would be hundreds of Bibles in different languages. And I knew that occasionally my father would disappear. And later on, I somehow gradually learned that because he had a double-sided Volkswagen van,
Mm-hmm.
and in between those two sides, they hid the Bibles and crossed the border to most of the time to Romania, but even to Ukraine or the then Czechoslovakia, and were bringing over Bibles in their native languages, in Hungarian and in other languages. And they would cross the border, unload the Bibles, and come back with an empty van for another load. And when you see ministry like this, that is so alive and so dedicated, it becomes a part of your bloodstream.
That's probably why you do family therapy so well, of kind of looking at the resilient part, and also like this is how we need to do relationships. We need to kind of challenge the systems that are in place sometimes that kind of constrict. It might be helpful, Emöke, to kind of share a little bit about why were Bible smuggling needed? Kind of how was that? Why was that even a thing? Because nowadays publishing is kind of free and we can do those type of things. But in Hungary and behind the Iron Curtain, I don't think everybody knows that wasn't okay. Bibles were actually contraband.
Not just Bibles, but Christian literature was not allowed. I remember that the first C.S. Lewis Narnia chapter, I read in an illegal copy as 15, 16-year-old girl. Yeah. So Bibles were not allowed because it was against the system. Anything that could challenge the system, the communist idea, the communist thought, was illegal. It didn't have to go against it. It was enough if it was already challenging.
So it wasn't only Christian literature then, right? It was all types.
Not just Christian literature. I know of people in Transylvania, in Romania, who were imprisoned because they found Hungarian poetry in their pockets. And I just recently did an interview with a woman who was imprisoned for 6 years when she was 19, because they found one single poem that she had copied when she saw it somewhere else, and they found it on her, and they said it is against the system, so you go to prison. And she was there till 24, 25, somewhere. So because of that, Christian literature and Bible was not allowed. Hungary had the Christian literature a little bit more, and the Bibles, because of our revolution. But the countries that did not have revolution, they could not have that.
So thinking about your parents and your grandparents, how did they fight the pull of the system to kind of bring you all up? Your grandparents bringing your parents up, kind of trusting in relationship and having a sense of community, and then your parents doing that with you. How did that become something that was passed through the generations, while out in society there's pressure against freedom, against thought, and the danger of always being turned in by other family members or communities?
People often think that when you want to teach something, you need to teach against, but that's not a powerful enough education, because against is temporarily. That's my conviction. It's based on anger, and we can get exhausted with anger. But when you teach something that you are for, not against, but for, then there is depth in it, there is creativity, there is growth in it, and that is intriguing, that is challenging, that can really be a part of your identity. And my parents were not necessarily talking about anything against communism. They were talking about for our faith. They were talking for our belief system. They were talking about for our value system. And because of it, we were just totally soaked with the value, rather than going against something. That would have been too light. And because of it, it stayed. It is firm. Yeah. It is constant.
That's amazing. One of my thoughts, and I'm sure it's a question other people have, is did you ever get the sense they were afraid when they were making these runs across the borders?
Yes, I don't think bravery or faithfulness means we are not afraid.
Hmm.
It just really is that there is something that is a lot more and worth more than your fear or that you are protecting. And for them and for us and for me, what we were fighting for, which wasn't a fight, what we were living for, was so valuable and so dear that it just challenged us to overcome our faith.
Hmm.
So fear was present. It's constant. I mean, interesting that even now, when I am tired, I realize how I become more intense. I become paranoid at times. By paranoid, I mean
Not diagnosable. Yeah.
no, no. But like when somebody talks about something very serious on the phone, I tighten up. I'm so used to being recorded, listened to on our phone. We know that our phones were recorded, bugged, and
Emöke, just
by the way,
yeah, we're recording.
just we don't want it to be a secret.
oh, now that's horrible. I didn't know.
Yeah, oh no, but you're used to it, so it's fine.
Yeah, but that's not phone, that's Zoom, so that's
Oh,
different.
okay, that's different. Okay.
And I see who is recording. Then all you heard is a click.
Oh,
Or-
yeah. That's
Yeah,
different.
you were talking to somebody and suddenly you hear a click or your voice changes and or it's echoing. So even today when I talk with somebody and my friends or my colleagues tell me something that I think maybe is not for public,
Mhm.
then I will tighten up and I will tell them, please, I tell them, let's not talk about it on the phone. It's a common sentence. I still say, I
Yeah.
cannot get away from it.
Isn't that amazing?
It's just imprinted.
Yep. And it's way back. It just takes a little one part of the sequence, right? A click, and it goes right back in your brain to those past experiences.
Yeah. And usually it's anything that is not family.
Mm.
It can be business, it can be politics, it can be anything else. But it cannot be. It will trigger it instantly.
I think it's fascinating that what you said about fear. I think that's really powerful, and I just want to kind of call attention to it because a lot of people think I'm not brave enough to do something, to take action on something I really believe in because I'm too afraid. But I think it's powerful to realize that fear is still present and you can still act. And then even years later, you have that high alert setting that's still there, but it doesn't stop you from acting.
No, it's important that I recognize it, or that it's the same trigger again.
Mm-hmm.
It went on again. I have accepted it that there are parts of me that will jump in fear, even now, and probably it will remain in this world, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I cannot base my identity. I cannot base my relationships. I cannot base my future. I cannot base my decisions, my actions, my ministry on that. And it's something very important I often ask myself, what is there for me to lose?
Yeah.
Mhm.
What is there for me to lose if I give in to fear? And what is there for me to lose if the fear becomes truth? If it happens, what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the answer is I'm better off if I go ahead, regardless of my fear, because it is more treasurable for my heart, what I want to go for, than the fear that is threatening me.
But that's a really hard, how do you practice that? That's a really hard task, to kind of feel the fear or feel the emotion and take a pause and think through what you just said of how is this good for me? What might be the risks, and make an informed choice rather than just reacting. How do you practice that?
Well, when I react, I ask myself, what was it? And I do think about it. Boy, am I afraid by the end, and am I tired by the end of the day? Believe me, because I do think about it. When I react, I say, "What was this? What triggered it? What am I afraid of? what is there for me to lose that is so important for me that I tied up this much? And it's interesting to look into it. I also ask myself, Emöke, are you really honest with yourself? It's a common question I ask myself because I know we can fool ourselves. I see it in my clients, and I don't want to fool myself because I want to grow.
Yeah.
I want to mature, and I am in love with maturity. I wish one day I get there. I mean, I know it will be in heaven, but
Yeah.
just maturing is and growing is just amazing. It's so desirable, and the only way to reach it, if I can look in the mirror and say, "Are you honest with yourself?" And I have to give myself time to hear that little voice back there that says, "No, no,
Yeah.
you're faking it to your own self." So that helps recognizing fear and the treasures that are fighting against each other, treasure and the fear.
I think that's a really, really good word that we need to practice that and listen and have space to listen. Sometimes we get so busy moving so fast. I kind of want to talk about this fear that we were talking about in the past of what is it like now? We know here in the States, economic fear, fear of kind of politics. We moved from an anxious kind of society to a fear-based society. I'm curious of what's going on in Central and Eastern Europe right now from your perspective around fear and then leaning into that, and we'll talk after that a little bit about how to respond to that.
Well, it is right now. I think it's very real in society. I mean, we have not just financial questions of today's society. I mean, not just the economic pressure that we have on all over the world, but in our neighborhood there is a war going on, and ever since the war broke out, many times I thought about it. It's right in the neighborhood. Any day they can say they will take my sons. So it is reality, and also the economics is pressure is increasing. They, like right now in Hungary, they changed the taxing law, so it decreased my income a lot. The prices are going up, very skyrocketing, and inflation is skyrocketing. So the for example, my counseling agency's prices went 7 times higher than what they were, 7 times. So it is a question all the time. And just today, I'm coming back from a very difficult discussion with my team of what if we have to close? What if we cannot pay? What if it gets over our head? And the final conclusion, although we went through every single possibility of what else can we do, the final conclusion was, but God has been faithful. I mean, we have come such a long way, and we cannot be so narcissistic that we would think that it was all our work. God has been blessing our work, and He has been present. And the only way to go forward is to look backward and say, the one who has been faithful, that doesn't change. Economic does, politics does, war and peace changes all the time, but God is the same. And that is the only thing that gives me hope for tomorrow.
Oh, that's perfect segue, Emöke, because we really wanted to talk about your thoughts on hope, given all of these hard things we've been talking about, and fear and pressures from society and all of that. We know you've written about hope, and you have a lot to say about it because you focused on it and you've experienced it. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that response to those hard things. And you just kind of summed it up nicely, but tell us some more about where you find your hope and how other people can look for the positive in what's going on.
Well, I'm always afraid that people will realize that the things that I write or speak about are always about me.
That's the case for all of us.
They have a tendency to think that it's for them, but actually I'm just telling them what I'm ruminating in my head about my life. So a hope is really something. I think in my life I have had so many difficult situations when I felt like I'm stuck and there is no way out, and so many times I felt like there is nobody else, no human being who can help me out. And actually, in many cases, nobody could help. That was the reality. It wasn't just a depressive thought, like dark cloud going over your head. It was the reality. But then what do you hold on to when there is humanly no hope? What do you hold on to when there is nothing you can hold on to? And it's a question that people ask me, and it's easy to tell them the answer. But I also ask myself, okay, wise guy, now what you are preaching, how is it true for yourself? And it is something that I love to give people hope, but the only way to give hope if I am convinced of it myself. Otherwise, I am speaking just cliches.
Yeah.
And I think I put hope in 3 dimensions. And I looked at the past, and I say in my book, and when I talk about hope, I always say, look at the past and see that if what I just mentioned earlier, that if you can be thankful for the past, that will give you strength, because the reason why you can be thankful because God has been there with you. And that gives you strength that he can be here with you in the present. And for the present, I always say we need to learn to be content in the present. It's not a favorite word of today. We are never content, but contentment means whatever is surrounding me, it is well with my soul because you're here with me, God. So gratefulness and thankfulness for the past and contentment for the present will give us hope, which is looking forward to the future. That's the outline, the skeleton of my hope conviction.
Well, and it's interesting because that skeleton, you've been telling us stories about that, even in terms of how to respond to fear, how to respond to anxiety, of take a moment, look back, see that there has been faithfulness, like within your company, that God has provided. And so then the expectation now and the expectation going forward is we'll live into that. What happens when there has been pain and that things haven't gone well? How do you, because I know we all have that in our life, how do we hold on to hope when we look back and there's been some pretty difficult things and pretty unsavory things that it's hard to see goodness coming through it?
I'm never saying be thankful for the pain. I'm saying be thankful for God being present in the midst of pain. And it's very different. People often think, and that's why they get rigid and stiff and even angry, because they think you have to be thankful and content with the bad things, with the pain, with the negative things, with the diagnosis, so with the divorce, with the relationship crisis, with the kids' problems. No, you shouldn't be thankful for that, and you don't need to be content with that. You need to work with that. You need to go forward, find a solution, see what you can change about yourself, the relationship, whatever is there. How can you help your pain with the painful diagnosis? How can you go through healing? Or even when death is approaching, you don't supposed to thank death to God. I mean, I love the words in the Bible when it says, as a last enemy, death will be wiped out. It's a Emöke free translation. But it is so comforting to know that God says, death is my enemy. I'm like, yeah, God, that's the same. We are bodies on this. We are on it together. The same whatever your enemy is my enemy too. What we need to be thankful for and content with is God being present in the darkness. God never leaving us alone in the darkness. God saying, I have been with you, I am with you, and I will be with you. And I love the conclusion because that's the Bible, the last statement. And one day you will be with me, and that will be for eternity. That's the beautiful arch of God's presence and presence in our lives.
That's amazing. I don't know even what to say after that. I think that sums up so well what's kind of kept you who you are through all this. And we love spending time with you.
So if people wanted to read your book on hope that you just gave us the skeleton, where could they find it? In English, because only a few of our
English
listeners speak Hungarian.
Well, in English, I'm working on it, but it is still not complete. I have done a rough draft of the translation, but it still needs a lot of refinement. But I really would like to give it out in English because I really believe that what it contains is a simple truth that no matter how deep waters we are in, God says, I'm there. And, in the Psalms, I think it's maybe 117. I'm not exactly sure. So if you look it up and it's not there, sorry, it's my dementia. But
we'll correct it in the show notes.
It's a beautiful phrase that says that those who have sailed on deep waters have seen the glory of God. Oh, gorgeous. So even if we are sailing through deep waters, God is there and we can see the glory of God. I think that's the greatest hope.
Amazing.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you, Emöke.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us all the way from Hungary. We look forward to next time.
Thank you from all the way from Wheaton.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
We invite you to visit our show notes page and website for more resources and information.
If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast and share with your friends. That would be a huge favor to us.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.